Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to get through. The biggest story in the NFL, Devante Adams, the star wide receiver, has requested a trade. We'll talk about potential landing spots, where he might end up, and what makes the most sense for teams to get him. That's our first segment. Later on in the show, we will cover MLB baseball, a great game right now going on between the Astros and the Tigers, an elimination game over there, as well as the other games from last night in both the NL and the AL, previewing the games happening today. Then turning our attention to college football. Conference realignment, the Heisman race, one of the closest ones in over 20 years. We'll break all of that down. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, October 2nd. But like I was saying, starting off our show today here in the NFL, Devante Adams, star wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders, has officially requested a trade after sitting out last week's game and a like tweet by head coach Antonio Pierce saying that Devante Adams might have played his last snap as an Oakland Raider. There's been a lot of turmoil in his whole in his whole Raiders saga, right? Signing with the Raiders originally to play with his college quarterback, Derek Carr. Derek Carr then gets cut one season after he signs. That's the only reason he left the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers, was to play with his college quarterback. Derek Carr, now in New Orleans. Devante Adams had trade rumors circulating around him for the better part of 2 years at this point, whether that be rumors of reuniting him with his former NFL quarterback in Aaron Rodgers over there with the Jets after he signed over there, or whether that be new rumors of places he might go. There's been a lot of talk of where Devante Adams might end up, and I have a list of 4 places that I think would need him the most or would fit him the best. There's a lot of other places he could go, but off the top of my head, I think there are 4 places that fit his style, his need, and would work the best. Number 1, or we'll start at the bottom. We'll start at number 4 here. At number 4, most likely, I think, for places he's going to go, is the Kansas City Chiefs. And in most other circumstances, this would be the number 1 landing spot that I expect him to go to, right? The Chiefs in the last couple of seasons have made mid-season trades for receivers. This year, it's no different for their need at receiver. They went out and they signed Hollywood Brown. He's out for the season with his injury. Rashee Rice avoided a season-ending injury with his scary-looking knee injury last week, but still, he's going to be out for an extended period of time. The Kansas City Chiefs need a receiver, and they need a receiver pretty badly. The one issue, and I'm sure all of you are screaming at your screens right now, the biggest issue with the Kansas City Chiefs is that the Raiders are in their division. And it's going to take a lot to have an in-division trade for a player of his caliber. That's not something you see too often. It's not something I expect to happen. In any other circumstance, I think the Chiefs are a team that hop on this and pull the trigger and make this happen. Because adding Devante Adams to Mahomes' arsenal, I don't want to imagine how that would look like. That would be scary. And I still think it's a possibility. The Raiders are asking for a second-round pick. Plus. I think if the Chiefs give them a first-rounder and, say, a 4th, I think that might get this deal done. It's a high asking price, but it's in division. You're going to have to pay more. And if you outbid the competition enough, I think there's a chance they get this done. So I'm not counting this one out entirely, although it is a much smaller chance than I think a lot of these other options, these other three options that I have for Davante Adams landing spots. At number 3, we're going with the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, the connection is there. Davante Adams has named the New Orleans Saints as one of his higher ranked teams to go to. The connection, again, the reason that he decided to sign with the Raiders was because of Derek Carr. Derek Carr, obviously now quarterbacking down in New Orleans. They have a nice need at receiver. Chris Olave is a solid wide receiver one. Rashid Shaheed is a good deep threat, but they don't really have that number one superstar receiver as much as people want to anoint Chris Olave. That they don't have that. That offense, when the run game isn't going, has been sputtering a little bit. Adding Davante Adams to infuse the offense that they've been missing for the last couple weeks would be huge for this Saints team. It would fit them. They have the money to do it, and it's a place that Davante Adams would like to go. The reason this one is at number 3 is because the Saints are a team that feel like they have the least amount of assets to move. They feel like they're the team that is stuck the most. And if I'm Davante Adams, leaving Las Vegas, and I had to choose between my 2 former quarterbacks, I'm leaning towards the team number 2 on my list, and that is the New York Jets. Obviously, this team was going to be on my list. Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, that's just a match that we've seen work amazingly in the past. Lots of memes saying, hey, Davante Adams is missing Aaron Rodgers is missing Davante Adams. Aaron Rodgers is a quarterback that loves certain receivers. Specific receivers. He's not a guy that can just plug and play with any receiver, and we're kind of seeing that with Garrett Wilson, although we thought that was going to work out a little better than it has. If you add Davante Adams in there, along with what Allen Lazard has been able to do recently, Lazard has been kind of been that wide receiver one over there. Mike Williams has been solid for them as well. You add Davante Adams into that mix, that Jets team hopefully fixes their offense. I don't know. That offense has been a mess, and I don't really know what's wrong with it because it seems like they've got everything they need. Great running backs, solid offensive line. But adding Davante Adams into that mix would be awesome. And again, they're not number 1 for a couple of reasons. First of all, the Jets front office already has made a mess of itself this offseason with the whole situation with pass rusher Hassan Reddick. This is not where you want to be as you get further on into the future, right? You get a really good wide receiver. He is 32, and he's higher up on the list. This fits their timeline, right? You don't want to go to a team like the Commanders are one that I've heard a lot with rising star Jaden Daniels. The Commanders have the cap space to get it done. The Commanders have the assets to get it done. It just doesn't make sense. Not saying Davante Adams wouldn't be a great fit in Washington, but you take a situation like Washington and a situation like New York, a 32-year-old receiver coming in is only going to accelerate the timeline in Washington as opposed to letting it build itself up naturally. And with a team on the rise like Washington, you don't want to do that. The Jets, they're kind of all or nothing at this point. So I feel like they're willing to give up those assets. Same with the Saints, but I feel like the Saints are still holding out hope that they're not going to be all or nothing. And I think the Saints are further away from competing at this point. And that leaves the number 1 team. The number 1 team that I think Davante Adams should and will join is the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys are the number 1 landing spot for me that I think Davante Adams will land at. First of all, it's a star player looking to get traded. That is music to Jerry Jones's ear. You're a big name, Jerry Jones wants you. It's generally how it works. That offense, outside of CeeDee Lamb, has literally nothing. They got nothing in the run game. That secondary receiver slot, wide open. Brandon Cooks has not been able to be that guy any kind of effectiveness that we kind of expect out of a guy like Brandon Cooks. He's hurt now. You don't have that second option at wide receiver. It's only CeeDee Lamb on offense. They need another weapon. They need another way to attack defenses because CeeDee, as good as he is, has not been able to do enough to get them to win these big games on his own. You add Davante Adams into that mix. They have the ability to make it work. They have the cap space to make it happen. They could do it right now. You add Davante into that mix. I mean, think about it. They've done something similar with Amari Cooper earlier on a couple of years ago. He's not a guy you have to commit long-term to, just a couple of years. I know you've already signed just about everybody else. That money's already there. This is an all-or-nothing Cowboys team, the way that they're paying their players right now, and right now they're trending more towards nothing. They need to make a big move, and I think this is going to be it, because that offense has a lot of holes, and I think this is the quickest and best way to fix it for them. There's not going to be another opportunity like this out on the market during the trade deadline. If the Cowboys want to be good, if they want to be competitive, I think they need to make this move, and I think that is what's going to happen. Now, the Raiders trade package, what they're asking for is a second-round pick and compensation, as reported by some beat writers over there. So you're looking at giving up a late second-round pick for these teams that supposedly are going to be competing for playoff spots, for deep playoff runs, back half of the second round right there, plus maybe you throw in a third or a fourth to get some kind of compensation. I think that's a deal. I think that's more than fair. I know that Devante Adams is a 32-year-old receiver, but you look at what he's able to do with bad quarterback play when he's out there on the field for the Raiders. It's really good. He's still one of the best receivers in the league. He's still definitely a top 10 receiver in the league. You could probably still make the argument that he's top 5, but he hasn't been able to shine with his quarterback situation down there in Vegas. I think Cowboys are absolutely where he's going. I think his two best fits schematically are with the Chiefs and the Cowboys. And the other two are just because of his quarterbacks. Those are two of the teams he's requested, and clearly it's because of the quarterbacks. Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, those are the guys he's played with that he's comfortable with. He knows that he'll work well with. Those are my top 4 teams. There's a couple other names out there that I've heard. I heard the Bears. I don't think that makes any sense at all. There's no one. I mean, sure, he might be better than all 3 of those receivers, but they already have 3 receivers, the Bears do. Odunze, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. You're not going to pay a whole lot extra to get a wide receiver 4 at this point, right? He's not going to slot into wide receiver 4, but you don't need that many wide receivers unless you're planning on trading one yourself. I've heard the Washington Commanders. I already talked about why the Washington Commanders, in my opinion, aren't a good fit. It just doesn't fit their timeline very well. There's a lot of teams out there that could use wide receiver help, but I think the Cowboys are the one that are going to pull the trigger, make this deal happen, because Jerry Jones wants a winner. And if Jerry Jones wants a winner, this is how he's going to get it. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where does Davante Adams end up? How much does it take to get him out of there? Does he get a new contract when he gets there? I don't think he gets one yet, but we'll see what happens. When we come back after this short break, we are going to delve into the playoffs. The MLB playoffs are in full swing. All 4 wildcard rounds played game 1 yesterday. Game 2 is already happening. A great game ongoing right now between the Tigers and the Astros. Elimination game for the Astros. We'll talk about all the AL games coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.